Jesus heals the boy with an evil spirit. Luke 9:37. Next day, when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met him. A man in the crowd called out, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son, for he's my only child. A spirit seizes him and he suddenly screams. It throws him into convulsions so that he foams at the mouth. He scarcely ever, it scarcely ever leaves him, and it destroys him. I begged your disciples to drive it out, but they couldn't." "Oh, believing and perverse generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you and put up with you? Bring your son here." Did he say it like that? I don't know. Even while the boy was coming, the demon threw him to the ground in a convulsion, but Jesus rebuked the evil spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father, and they were all amazed. Immediately afterward, now, while everyone was marveling at this, Jesus said to his disciples, "Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." I'm not going to say it again. "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men." But they didn't understand this, what it meant. It was hidden to them so that they did not grasp it and were afraid to ask. It goes on. An argument started among the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. Jesus, knowing their thoughts, took a little child and made him stand beside him. And he said to them, "Whoever welcomes this little child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. For he is the least of all. We are the least of all. He is the greatest." Okay, goodness me, what a difficult passage. Well, you see, I find it quite interesting that what we've seen in Luke is that previously they've just had the transfiguration with Peter, James, and John. So here we have they've had this absolutely stunning situation up in the mountain with Moses and Elijah, absolutely out of this world. And they come down and real life starts. It's like Elaine going to Scotland and coming back home again, isn't it, Elaine? There's that kind of feeling about it. And suddenly real life emerged. A man whose son had an evil spirit had asked Jesus, his disciples, to heal them, and they couldn't. The man was obviously annoyed about this. So Jesus really says something rather surprising. He says very strongly, "What have I come here? You unbelieving generation, perverse generation." And it sounds terribly strong. And funnily enough, in all three passages, it's exactly the same. It does seem out of character to me to actually say that. And obviously the guy would have heard that. The guy who he was healing heard it. And it just seemed incredibly strong to actually have those words. And I couldn't find anywhere which kind of talked about that or anything. And all three passages included it. So I was a bit bemused about that. So I haven't got a very good answer, but it's just interesting to say that. But there's three passages in there. Now, they say slightly different things. I'm trying not to look at them all up. So there's a passage in Matthew 17:14 that says very similar things, and Mark 9. And the way that is purported is slightly different. The first part is very similar, but Matthew says, well, in the first one, you see, there's no comment about why the disciples couldn't do it. There's no comment at all. In the passage in Matthew, Jesus said they couldn't do it because they lacked faith. And then he goes on to say, faith is as small as a mustard seed. And if you say to this mountain, move, and it will move, if you've got a little tiny hope, a little tiny faith. Now we can read that and we say that from our point of view, it doesn't work, does it? You know, we have a massive problem and we say, Lord, can you help me? Nothing happens. So there are ways round it, and people have preached on this, but it does seem that we're not just hoping. Somehow when we pray, there's often a kind of a revelation of God that actually gives us deep inside us a knowledge that he has this in hand and he's working on it. But it's an issue that I find very difficult, and therefore I'm going to pass over that one as well. And the third one adds this fact, the bit in Mark adds the fact that, well, it's longer because the whole story is that Jesus talks to the man whose son has this problem, and the guy says, well, can you help me? And Jesus said, yes, of course I can. But in fact, and then the disciples come to him afterwards and say, well, why couldn't we do it? And he says, you couldn't do it because you actually didn't have faith. And also that you have to, this is a situation where you really have to pray about it and fast. So there's three different bits in it that are kind of, in a sense, to me, unsatisfactory. But there we go. So that's the first bit. The second bit, of course, is we read is the bit which talks about Jesus. Then immediately afterwards, it says Jesus said, while everyone was marveling at this is funny, you see, at exactly the same moment, he's in this same situation. Jesus said something to his disciples, and presumably the funny situation is that they're all there. There's this guy being healed, and then Jesus, out of the blue, suddenly says, look, listen carefully, he says, what I'm going to say. The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of men, but they did not understand it. Now, why on earth, when this miracle had happened, did Jesus suddenly kind of talk to the disciples, which are presumably still there, and say this? So there's all the guys standing around and they're marveling at this the guy that has been healed. And then Jesus says this kind of rather irrelevant thing about the fact that the Son of Man is going to be betrayed by someone. It seems bizarre. And if you look at Luke in that, in Matthew, there's slightly different in that it says much at a later time. So it's not at the same time. In the second version, it says at a later time, Jesus said this to the disciples. It's immediately afterwards. But the other one, the second passage, kind of gives a gap. So that's more logical. So it's kind of confusing. I'm sure there's a theological answer to this, but I couldn't find it. And then there's the third bit about the greatest, which is kind of strange again, and yet we can understand it. Basically, Jesus is saying that the whole issue is that nobody has any kind of he wants to see no one who says, yeah, I'm the greatest. Look at what God's given me. I'm pretty good. He said, no, it's what your attitude should be is like a child who is learning from their parents, that he is the greatest as he looks to the one who's teaching him. And Jesus is really saying that our attitude simply is that we're learning from the master all the time. And we can at no stage say, wow, I've got it now. Great. I can go off on my own and do it. He's saying we just need to be humble, that God gives us gifts, and the gifts are his gifts that he's given us. And really, we might kind of think, well, crumbs, I'm good. I'm leading a church now. Look at that. They said, I'm much better than these guys. He said, no, you're not. You're like a child. Even when you've got all these gifts, you're my child. And I have given you the gifts you've given. Before the foundation of the earth, I chose you and made you and put you together. And you've got to look to me all the time. So that is my comment, which I find quite unsatisfactory. So there we go. But what I'll finish with was this absolutely silly incident, which I find happens to me. I get tiny miracles happening. They're only tiny, but they're absolutely bizarre. And God keeps saying to me, yeah, I'm looking after you. I'm looking after you. Now, a funny thing happened 2 days ago. We got a little tiny strip light in our passage leading to the loo. And it's only kind of 18 inches long, something like that. And it's been going forever and ever and ever and ever. I can't remember. And it went 2 days ago. And I thought, oh, for goodness sake. So I took it out and I went to the place in Merstham that I get all my Yes, or whatever it's called, Yes Electrics or something, I don't know. And I went in there kind of with my little tube in my hand, 18 inches long. There's a guy in there. He said, goodness me. He said, you got one of those? Oh, you got one of those? Oh, right. He said, yeah, funny, isn't it? He said, I'm picking up 25 of them. Because I do strip lights in little tiny things that like when you've got coffee machines, you have a little strip light that shows a light, and I've got all these machines and things. I've got little tiny strip lights, and I kind of service them and all that type of thing. So I buy 25 at a time, but basically it takes me about a couple of years to go through my 25. So he says, here, I might as well give you one. So the bloke came out with it, you see, and he said to the guy selling, do you mind if I take one of your sales away? I'll give this guy one of my strips of light. So he said, no, that's all right. So I thought that was just absolutely stunning. I happened to be there at the same time as a guy was buying 25. And you think, well, isn't that, it's a stupid little situation, but somehow you note that God is looking after me. And I thought that was a good thing to finish with after lots of negatives. How about that, guys? Okay.